also has to be representative of Madawaska, St. Agatha, and Fort Kent, and Wallagrass. And you can, if you so choose to invite other member communities that are not currently part of our districts. So there are people who ask questions about, what about Grand Isle? Grand Isle is a tuitioning community. They are not part of Valley Unified. If they would want to be part of the RSU, that's something that can be entertained now or later. I've explained to the boards that it's probably cleaner to start with what you have right now and then invite other entities afterwards, but that's not my choice. That's just me speaking from what's already very difficult to manage, and adding other players to the table might make that even more challenging. The same thing can be said for Allagash, the same thing can be said for Eagle Lake, Winterville, or whomever you wish. You can invite Caribou if you want, and if Caribou wants to join this RSU, that's something that can happen. And then the retention of local SAU control is something that is in our strategic plan. You know, in our planning, we did say that communities should keep an elementary school in each district. And I know it's nobody's intent around this table or any of the boards to close down elementary schools. The local SAUs really feel that the only way that they can go into this wholeheartedly is if the local control of their elementary school is not under the governance of the RSU. I've gone back and forth with the department about, can you do subgroups of the RSU to govern? And there's nothing clear in statute that allows that. There's nothing clear in statute that doesn't allow it, but as we see with other past precedent, if it's not written in statute, it's probably going to be a no. I would love to have only one board to have to deal with, but it doesn't appear that that's going to be possible right now. The keeping the local control of the K to 6 is very important. Right now, under RSU law, it doesn't specify 7 through 12. So we had to ask our local legislators to submit a bill, which Senator Jackson has done on our behalf, to change the language, or to modify the RSU language to allow for specific grade levels to be formed. That language was sponsored by the Department of Education. It's not something that I wrote. The department, wrote a draft of that language, and we sent it to Senator Jackson, and he's submitted that bill, or has planned to submit it. I think that you can only submit bills after the election or something. There's some rules with that. But it is in the works to be submitted for consideration. So, do we want to have any discussion, negotiation around the formation of the RSU? Or is that one that's pretty clear and cut?
So our deadline for this is the 31st of December?
And I asked again yesterday for a written deadline. We got a response, Giselle and I, yesterday afternoon from Joanne Allen, who did apologize. She's working on it and plans to give it to us. But yes, the commissioner has confirmed in an email that I sent to her that the end of this calendar year is our deadline.
So if Senator Jackson can't submit the bill until after the election, that doesn't give much time for that?
Senator Jackson has told me he submitted it, but I think it's
well, nothing can happen until after the election.
I don't know that there's going to be a legislative session for quite a while, but the fact that that bill has been submitted means that the process has already started.
Okay.
So on the issue of, somebody asked this question of me, and I don't know what the answer is. If we have, let's just take SAD 27, because that's what I know. If we have a board of directors that's managing pre-K through 6, and then we have the regional RSU that's bigger,
Yeah.
that's handling 7 through 12.
Yeah.
Are we doing 2 budgets?
Yes.
So we have 2 referenda.
Yep. Your SAD 27 budget will be just like it is now, but just for pre-K to 6. And then your budget for Valley Unified will be a referendum amongst all member communities.
So in Fort Kent proper, when I go to the poll, I'll be voting for 2 budgets.
Correct.
Is the RSC under this, sorry, where are we now? ESC, still going to be submitting budgets under this plan?
Yes. But my proposal is that your Valley Unified Board becomes your Valley Unified RSU Board becomes your Valley Unified Board. And that board will have to approve 2 budgets, but your ESC budget will be very minimal, just your shared services. This would work better if I had it drawn with a flow chart. That would be very confusing.
And then the tally for that is region-wide. For the RSU, it would be general population,
Yeah.
majority rules, and then the SAD 27, each individual SAU would be their SAU communities.
Yeah. The approval of an RSU can only be done by the local voters. So what our vision is for this would be if Valley Unified Regional School is allowed to continue, that referendum vote for that school would also have a separate referendum for the formation of Valley Unified. So essentially your voters are voting to approve a school and voting to approve a governance for that school at the same time. You don't want one to happen before the other because you don't want a school that you can't govern, and you don't want to govern nothing if you don't have the school. So having a parallel track for that would be the cleanest way. The only danger is what if one passes and the other one fails, then we'd have to have some language into, both of these have to be approved. There's got to be some legal language that can be put in to protect so that we, don't form an RSU and now we don't have a school. Because that's to be voted down.
If I could, then, under the number 2, the identification of issues, the formation of the RSU. I haven't been here part of the process for that long, but at some point, whether that's when we go back to our individual boards or we can do it tonight or whatever, I would like to know, and maybe others would like to know too, and we have newer members on our board. What's the structure that's there now, and what are we looking to change it to? Because I want to make sure that I'm clear on what's going down, what's happening.
As far as the RSU language change? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've given that, I think it was before you, I've done, the then and now.
Okay.
With the strike through, I can get you that.
That'd be
We
great.
can revisit that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank
It's
you.
minimal changes. It literally just, changes that the K to 12 RSU and strikes that out and says, any grade level RSU, and there's some other minimal changes.
Right, but as far as also like how the community representation and the one person, one vote,
Yeah.
what are we at today? And with these new things coming into play, what's going to be the change?
So the ILA to become different.
So those are 2 different things because there's nothing today. There's nothing today. Right now we don't have an RSU, so that's going to be a whole new thing altogether. I think what you're alluding to is
Probably prior to not the RSU, what we currently have now.
for Valley Unified.
Thank you. Yes, that's what I meant.
Yeah, that's going to be the last one, item C.
Okay.
We're going to talk
Okay.
about that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Right
So-
now, we're just RSU.
So logistically on the RSU, aren't we going back to the drawing board currently? Because the RSC lacks the legal standing to build a school?
No, actually, the RSC can build a school. We can bond for it, we can do all those things.
But the statute says it has to be a school unit, and the RSC is not a school unit.
To govern, only to govern.
But on the building statute as well, it limits, the language is limited to a school unit for building. So I'm just worried we put a whole bunch of effort into this again,
Yeah,
and then discover, whoops, we can't do anything. Because the statute, Keith Jondro pointed it out in our last meeting, the statute on new school construction, it's clear that it's a school unit that needs to construct a school and go through, jump through all the hoops. And that's the same kind of, that was what got us in trouble in managing the school, is that it says a school unit must manage the school. It's also a school unit must build the school. So, have we figured out, like, where does that put us? Because up to date, it hasn't been a school unit, it's been an educational service center.
yeah. And we were awarded a school as an education service center, so I think had this been a concern, it would be on the DOE's radar. They've awarded it to us, they've allowed us to do site selection, you know, they're willing to allow us to concept design it. So I can follow up, Toby, you know, where it says that and what the thought is, but my guess would be that the regional service centers law is a loophole in that, and I don't know.
Yeah, the whole thing was on the legislative level seemed a little half-baked, because there's contradictory statutes. That's always a problem. And I seem to recall the commissioner not being terribly excited at this doing the thing at the same time idea. Like, I remember she was very skeptical of that notion. So has she had a change of heart around that? Because I remember Scott Brown, I think, brought it up, this idea of we'll vote for both things at the same time, we'll run them parallel.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you and Scott Brown have put that forward. And I remember the commissioner not being kind of cold to that. I mean, are we sure that that's something they're going to permit? Because she wasn't excited about it.
Well, the last conversation we had was when we went, and that's how we discussed it, and didn't get a sense that that was a concern. Because I did share, you know, we don't want to have a school that we can't govern, and we don't want to govern no school. So we have to have both.
Well, let's just make sure that.
Yeah, I will. Hello. So, I guess, do we feel that our school boards are going to be fine with the formation of an RSU in order to move forward? Are they going to be fine that that's going to be a one person, one vote board with community representation, and that we're going to work to retain local control of pre-K to 6? Is that something you think that your boards will be comfortable with? And I know you're just representing, but for the sake of what we're taking back to our boards, I think you've worked with your boards long enough to know that this is what we've been talking about, and this is the way we see it.
We've discussed it, we were all on the same page. That's 33 years.
Yep.
I think SED 27 was feeling that they would like to extend an invitation to the tuitioning communities in the formation.
what are your thoughts about that, Madawaska and 33? Reaching out to our tuitioning, is exclusively to our tuitioning communities? Like, I'm not gonna put an RFP out for like,
See if Callis wants to come.
So, now, you mentioned that a while ago, what's the difficulty in extending an invitation now and then creating an RSU, or waiting and then extending the invitation? You said something a while ago where it was easier to,
just in my mind, you know, we have 3 boards represented here. If we were to invite the other 3, 4, now we would have 7 at the table. So, I would just think.
Can I ask a clarification? Were you referring to the process of developing the RSU? To invite the tuitioning
Yes.
communities for the development of the RSU?
Yeah.
Well, I think SAT 33 has mentioned before that we would be okay, at our last meeting, we mentioned that to, you know, invite the other communities, the tuition community. If the process goes smoother to invite afterwards, I mean, I guess we don't really have any extra communities to invite, but for us, I think whatever is going to make the process go smoothly, because the ultimate goal is to get school up and.
And just bear in mind that those other communities cannot hop into your school project, as that was awarded to 3 districts. It wasn't awarded to 7 districts. So in a parallel structure, you can do this RSU thing with all the partners, and that's fine, as long as you understand that the school is between the 3 of them.
so that it would make sense to invite before.
At the moment, yeah.
It may in the planning of, you know, and I don't know what 27's, you know.
Well, what would that mean after if the RSU board becomes the Valley Unified Board?
Right.
It seems like that would be a hiccup.
Yep.
But, may I say,
Yeah.
if you were to keep whatever structure the Valley Unified is now and proceed to developing the RSU with your current communities, you could make that plan with the forethought of this is what it's going to be when the other communities join. So you're inviting them, but you're actually creating the format that it will run in. So I'm just thinking of having X number of communities, it just makes it hard, but.
There was language in the ILA, I haven't read it in a while,
Yep.
about inviting other
Yep.
communities.
New members or associate members. Yep.
I have a hard time picturing in my head what the difference is and all the little, what it ends up meaning.
Yeah, if you're a member like the 3 of us are, you agree to purchase the services that the ESC provides. So any new member we invite, they would have to agree that they're purchasing a superintendent service, they're purchasing, you know, a director of finance service or food service, whatever. And some of them might be moot because they might be communities that don't operate a school, so they don't need a food service director. The associate membership is more specific to bits and pieces, and it kind of outlines like municipalities joining as associate members. So if they wanted to hop on, you know, fuel bids with us and that type of thing, you could have associate members that don't have the full scope. They just have parts of the.
So essentially, you're on the back burner for a lot of this.
Yeah.
But there's a provision already to allow the tuitioning schools, if they, tuition communities, if they wish to come on board, they could under the regional educational service center, I'll get it right. But,
Yes, yeah.
Or so, okay,
I want to call it an RSC. And I don't know.
And I have received from one community, MSD 10, maybe a year ago, an inquiry. But it was somebody who was just a resident, was planning on running for the school board, and I think was just doing some homework, and said that, you know, there was talk in the community of approaching us to look at, you know, whether or not they could join in to the education service center for some of those services.
Which one's 10 now?
Okay. But nothing ever materialized after that.
I don't know, I think we're just changing everything as we go. And it's gonna be hard to sell this to the voters if we keep on changing things. And then, personally, my gut feeling is to stay to 3 until, but then I can understand what you're saying too. I'm scared that we're gonna lose credibility with the public, but always changing. I think you had said it once, we started playing baseball, now we're playing football. It seems like we're always changing something, and the public is having a hard time to grasp that. The perception anyways is what they're having a hard time with. We might understand what's going on, but I guess maybe we're not doing a good job of explaining it to them.
But I think we also didn't know a whole heck of a lot starting. We know a whole lot more now than we did even 6 months ago. So it makes sense to adapt as you have new information. And maybe we do need to do a better job communicating.
Yeah, I think bringing in our partner communities in SAP 27 is an important part of where we're coming from. I know some of our board members have spoken to some of their board members, and there's conversations. They don't know where they want to hop in, but I'm getting the sense that they may be interested in participating. I think it's something I know it's something for City 27, and this was one of the things that we walked out of our last board meeting saying we wanted to talk about. And it's one of the things that's really important to us. Because we've been partners with Eagle Lake, Winterville, and Allagash for decades. In fact, we were part of our board until relatively recently. Not Allagash, Allagash we were partners. So. And I think Holden changed their stock change who was participating at some point, and that didn't cause anything to go too crazy.
They're done now, so.
Yeah, or before it fell apart,
Yeah, I'm
they
not
added
sure.
somebody.
I'm not sure if they,
As far as, and I don't want to speak for Tammy, our chairwoman, but as far as, the comment that you made as far as tuitioning towns or whatever coming in, I don't know that we'd like to know what that would entail. I don't think we're for or against it. Just what does that do if we allow them? Again, coming back to my earlier question, we've got something set up now. If whatever we change, we just all need to know what it's changing to, and are we okay with that or not?
Yep.
So as long as, but for me, I'm not gonna say I'm for one way or another now. Out of those 3 things in 2A, I definitely think the third bullet, the retaining of the local SAU control of K through 6, I think our board is pretty much right on that. I don't think we want to have any changes there. But as far as 1 and 2, until we know what it is that we're talking about and what changes are going to be there, I can only speak for myself, but I don't think I'm ready to approve or disapprove. I don't know what I'm voting on.
And I think at our last board meeting, the thought process was basically to stay with the communities that we have now. Now, if we're pulling in all the tuition schools, I think we just need to go back to our board and get a feeling like what they feel. Yes, we're representing the board, but our discussion was all based around the team players that we had at that point. Now it seems like we're adding more team players, so, I can sit here and give you my personal opinion, but that's not necessarily what my board may feel. So I think it's something, I know it's back and forth, but these are big changes, and we've got to make sure that we dot our I's and cross our T's.
But the questioning comes when others are invited, they cannot make the decisions with us, correct? Is that what you were saying? They're not a part of the decision-making process?
they're not gonna be part of Valley Unified Education Service Center
Mhm.
unless they petition to do so, and then the board would have to approve new members. So anything dealing with the school, they would not be part of the decisions about that school, because that school was awarded to the three of you. The Valley Unified.
Was it awarded to the three of us or to Valley Unified?
We applied as separate entities, as three separate boards.
So, SAD 33, SAD 27, and Madawaska schools
Yeah.
are the recipients, not Valley Unified.
In the application, yes, it was the three schools that were awarded the project. Because you had to be three districts or more to get awarded this project. So we applied as three districts.
But it's not the three districts managing it, it's Valley Unified.
And that's because of the IOA that we formed.
Okay, so if we choose, if Valley Unified chooses to make changes, there's nothing stopping us.
Yeah, right. Yeah, if something changes to the ILA or, yeah. Okay, yeah.
When we asked the commissioner directly, what if other communities join us now? Her response was, the grant was given to the three SAUs. The other schools that were invited would not matter or make a difference. Pretty much what was asked.
And to our point was, what if somebody joins and then somebody leaves? And she said, the three core cannot leave. If one of the three core leave, then it's no. You know, so we couldn't invite Grand Isle and then, you know.
Well, Grand Isle again.
Right, yeah.
But that's not exactly the same. I mean, that's a little different than adding somebody. I mean, you can't swap members out.
Yeah, you have the ability, or Valley Unified has the ability to accept new members at any time. Yeah. So are we good on this one? I think we're all at a common understanding?
Well, I think the one issue, I think, because there were basically there's four things here. The one person, one vote, I think Sarah spoke to that, community representation, retaining control of K through 6, I think we had some questions about how it was going to look. But there was an overarching question about joining the RSU. And I don't think SAD 27, unless we deal with the other stuff, is there. I think that's our position. Is that there's a whole other, we're not saying yes.
Right.
We're saying
It's a package deal.
it's a package deal.
Got it. Yeah, I think it is for everyone.
Okay. I just want to be clear.
Yep. I'm going to move on to site selection. We have straw poll results, and we all know what the results were. Overwhelming approval in two of the SAUs, one a dead even split, and what that all means. SAU 27 has had to grapple with what this means as a district, because they're hearing it from both sides, and a tie essentially is not approval. However, when you go back to the department and speaking with Scott Brown, you know, he's voiced that, you know, this is not uncommon for straw polls to have very close or even an unfavorable result, and projects do continue, because straw polls are just a pulse of what, you know, what the community is thinking, and it's just one step before the second step, and those two steps together, site selection, concept design, go to the voters for that ultimate approval at a referendum. So that's, you know, that's on the table, you know, what those results mean. And then there's been some conversation about should site selection be revisited based on some thoughts and feelings about, you know, how things have gone. We all know what that process was like. Some of us remember it very well and wish we didn't. But it was, we always knew this was going to be the most challenging step in this whole process, was identifying that site. And then I I do have to tell you, and I think I told all three boards, that when we did meet with the commissioner, Giselle and I, you know, she was very clear that FEDA's funds for engineering are not plentiful. They're looking at the department right now, it cuts everywhere. We haven't even been given a guarantee that the remaining funds we have for engineering are still available, which is concerning. I'm hoping that the department does not touch those funds. But I know that we do not have enough funds in FEDA's, even if we're allowed to do it, to revisit site selection and then do pull-off concept design. That budget was created by the department based on other projects, so they have a good idea about, you know, what the entire picture is going to cost. So I don't know how to start this conversation, but I thought that I put all that out so that you can start.
I'll start, because I remember it very well. The SAD 27 board struggles with the results, and it's kind of like 3 or 4 tiers of why. One is it was a tie. In no place is a tie an affirmative vote. I remember several meetings of discussions of how we were going to tally the vote and what the vote meant. I didn't bring it with me, but there was something A, B, or C, and if one of the districts was a negative vote, the thing that you're voting on is dead. And so, you know, we talked about some of the changes, and some of the change in story, I guess, was that if there's a no vote, the project dies, or if there's a no vote, you might be able to go. And it seems like that's been changing, and that's kind of, you know, we keep talking about things changing and struggling with it. One of the reasons that the tie is so disconcerting for us is because we had a different prompt than the other 2 districts. For example, Madawaska, the straw poll that you're about to vote on reads, are you in favor of the Frenchville 3A, 3B site as the location for the proposed Valley Unified Regional School? In Fort Kent, it reads, I will restate very simply, a yes vote indicates that you agree to the site selection and wish the Department of Education to allow Valley Unified to continue its studies into the viability of a project so that we can be back here to vote a second time after concept and dollar figures are in front of you. A no vote indicates that you do not agree to the site selection and that the Department of Education will determine whether or not the viability of this consolidation will or will not continue. Throughout the evening, it was said several times, a no vote will likely kill the project. So you had 800 and something people in that building hearing, a no vote means you'll probably lose it. So what we're afraid of is that some of those 419 yays didn't approve the site, they just didn't want to lose the project. So that straw poll is likely not indicative of how they actually feel about the site. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to get into the rehashed thoughts on the process and, you know, faulty information or how we got to the decision. I did reread some old some old emails in the days just after, and I think there was a lot of conversations between the site selection committee even saying, can we submit both sites to the Valley Unified Board and let them pick? You know, I think it wasn't as clear as the, you know, we keep hearing an overwhelming majority of Valley Unified residents voted in favor of the site, and I don't know that that's a clear picture, and I guess that's that 27's issue.
And I think what it comes down to is it feels like we were told 5 different things, and we were just asked to accept it every step of the way until the last one. And here we are, the 5th permutation of what we're going to do. Sarah talked about it a little bit, but originally we had a meeting here. Tom Kent was here. He was your chair. He was on the Madison board. There was discussion, and he said, so we need an affirmative vote from all 3 units for this project to move forward. We're talking about site selection. And yes, that was the answer. So that's fine. Then in the lead up to the vote, these signs went up around town before Ken, you guys probably didn't get them, but we got them on. But if you vote no, we'll never know. Suggesting, and there was a lot of stuff out in the community saying, if you vote no, the project's dead. Then what? Nothing was ever said to correct that. Okay? That was not true, but nothing was ever said to correct. Then we went to the straw poll vote. What Lloyd Susie said when he said it was the Department of Education is going to make this decision. If you vote yes, they could decide to kill this. If you vote no, then they move forward. If you vote yes, they move forward. If you no, they decide to kill it. And then basically deferred to the Department of Education. And then we met here to go over the poll results, and it was the Board of Education that was going to make the decision. That's what we were discussing. So it would be the Board of Education that will ultimately make the decision of whether or not we move forward. And then a group of us met with the commissioner, and she said that it's the local community's decision as to whether or not this process goes forward.
Who was the group that met with the commissioner, and why wasn't the other districts invited?
We asked to go. This was a while ago. We talked about this a long time ago. So we talked about this the last site selection. Thing. We got down to questions about this because of the moving target. Okay? We started out one target, and moved to another target, another target, another target. And we wanted to know, because the Board of Education was supposed to be able to make a decision. And the commissioner said it wasn't Board of Education. It was ultimately up to the local voter, the local chair, local community. Local control was the word she used. And our board took that to mean that we're a local board. We're the local control for our board. We're the city 27 represent our board. And I think we had a vote in our meeting to say that it was effectively the rejection of the site. With all things being equal, but the issue here, underlying all this, is that we went from something we all thought we understood, we agreed, to something different. And that's, I think, where the board is struggling.
Josh, I think at that meeting, she actually offered to come up and sit down with all the boards.
Yeah, I think we're still trying to get her to come up, right, or her and.
The sequence of events, I think you went in March, early March. In February, the commissioner offered to come up to Presque Isle to meet all boards, all 3 boards. SAD 27 refused. You opted to go and meet with the commissioner. Then COVID struck and so forth, and Ben at the time was trying to schedule the commissioner to come up to meet with all 3 boards. And she's still willing to come up to meet. From our last meeting with her, she said she's willing to come up. It's just that COVID struck and she couldn't schedule it.
Wasn't there a change of commissioner through this whole process as well?
No, it was before we started.
It was before.
This is the document that Sarah was referring to, where we had to decide as separate boards which of these options to approve in order to gain ultimate approval for the project. One was the separate votes in each school unit, which is ultimately what we decided to go with. The other one was a majority rules, so we're all lumped together. And then the third option was the town majority rules result. We chose option one. But if you notice that, and I know in listening to Sarah and Toby go back over that process, there was a lot of insinuations about negative straw polls and what that means, and those ending the project. But in this document, you see that the only reference to the project dying is at the voter approval requirement, which is your referendum vote. This is where we said, if a community votes this down at the polls, the project is done. So I think there was a lot of crossing over that information, and you're right, people said things, and if you and I do remember, moderators taking their own spin to what you're voting on, and I agree, it's problematic, but I think, and I'd have to go back and watch videos, I think we were clear that straw polls were not binding.
That I think would have changed a 3-point separation. And I agree that that's a lot of money to spend. And I agree that site selection has probably done more division in our valley than pretty much anything I can remember. I don't want to do it again, but I don't want to live with knowing that it wasn't done what I think we believe is correctly. So I believe for SED 27 is non-negotiable. Is that what you got? No. That it must be revisited.
So if it's revisited and the site selection is still the same site we have, what happens then? Is it not going to be accepted until it's in Fort Kent? Or, I mean, I just don't know how to look at this otherwise.
I wasn't a part of the first group or when this whole thing got started, but I am assuming that when we went out to either an RFP or however we ended up with the firm that was chosen, that was looked at, that was researched, and that they were totally impartial. I would hope. And that being said, the results are the results. And speaking on behalf of the Madawaska board, we would have loved to have that school in Madawaska, just like every other community would have loved to have that school. And we don't have it. And we're willing to, move forward with it in Frenchville, but again, it's a non-negotiable. If we felt it was unbiased and it was a fair process, we don't have the school, we're willing to deal with that and move forward with it in Frenchville. Otherwise, we're not moving forward. Our board is not looking at revisiting that issue.
We have to see past our town lines because our students don't see town lines. Our students see other students in other communities as their equals, as their friends. And for us to be divided by town lines and lose an opportunity such as this. I have 4 children who will go to this school. That's huge. And to know that that opportunity could just be thrown away, that's hard. I mean, that's my personal feelings, but a lot of people in our community feel that way. A lot of, and not just, I'm not talking Frenchville, I have a lot of friends up in Fort Kent and Madawaska with young children, and they all say the same thing. The opportunity for this school is crucial for their children.
I share the same views.
We've lost sight of why we are doing this, and I've said it before. We've totally lost sight of what we are working towards, and it's become a political issue. And until we rein it into what this school is about, why did we get together from the beginning, was decreasing numbers clear across the board, combining to increase numbers, to increase programs for our kids. Like that, that's why this committee was formed. I mean, I sat on that committee way back when. I sat on that committee even when Fort Kent was not a playing partner in it. So that's a long time ago. And we've totally lost sight of it. And now, exactly what Lana said. It's town lines, it's adult issues, it has nothing to do with that.
Businesses are worried about losing business because a school is not in their town. That's difficult, and the billboard signs said it all. But no one's going to stop going to do their grocery shopping in Fort Kent because there's a school in Frenchville. I mean, I'm not going to go grocery shopping in Frenchville. Jim's Convenience will only take me a long way, So I will still travel. People will still travel to work to go to Fort Kent. People will still travel to Madawaska. The thing is, I see it, if the economics part of it, if a school is built in Fort Kent, and then you take away Madawaska, Madawaska dies. The economics is there. No one's going to move to Madawaska to travel. Like, the economics of Madawaska will decrease. To sustain both communities, business-wise, real estate-wise, children-wise, it makes sense where it's at, but that's, I don't know if it's a bias point that I'm saying, but I just don't feel communities are a certain community is going to die business-wise if a school is not in the area.
I'm going to bring up something that has been hard to digest, and I mean, it was said at a meeting, and Toby, it was directed at you. So my question was, why has all of this come up only after the site was awarded? And your answer to me was, we were willing to take some concessions knowing that the school would be in our backyard. I have a hard time to digest that. I mean, we went through a whole process. How can you say that we knew the site was going to be in our backyard? How can any of us sit here and say that? Like, how was that seed planted, I guess?
You want the answer?
Sure.
Go back to one of the first sites. Well, let's go back to the beginning. When we first began this process of forming the Regional Service Center, we were the interlocal agreement. We were seeing some drafts of the interlocal agreement. The original interlocal agreement had this 3 votes per district arrangement. Our board took issue with that because we were the majority. We were the biggest district of the 3. And Sibley was there, and the board's pretty much the same, Sarah's. But we went over, we talked about what the guidelines were and what the state would require of a new construction. And it was presented to us that these are the things that the state requires to build a new school. We require moving the fewest amount of kids, the most amount of kids the shortest distance. You know, we were showing maps, showing how the population was on the west side of the valley. We were told to be looking at projected populations. And if you look at projected populations, we're atrophying slower than everyone else. We're losing our population at a much slower rate in SAD 27. There was talk of access to water, access to sewer, access to police, fire, and emergency services. We were told that those things were non-starters, and that just looking at the lay of the land, the sewer would have to be. I mean, it was just implied it's going to have to be before Kent, because Madawaska was too far from the center. Frenchville lacked a lot of the essential services that we understood were necessary. So when we voted to say 3 votes, 3 votes, 3 votes, we did it because it was on this understanding that it was only fair because of the way this process was built, it was inevitable that the school would be built. And that the least we could do to be good neighbors was to give you each 3 votes and give away 2 of ours. That was what got us there. So once we formed the regional service center with the understanding that we had all of the components in the checklist that the department wanted, okay? What changed my mind? The question you'd asked me originally was what flipped the switch, and I'll tell you what flipped the switch. I came here for the second site selection meeting. We were doing a Valley Unified meeting. I don't know if you remember, but we came here, we had to wait for site selection to leave. And there was a map on the board of the valley. Now, I don't expect you guys to know the geography of SAD 27. But our outer limit to the west is the border of Allegan. Our outer limit to the south is the border of Wallagrass and Eagle Lake. That map moved our border to Violet Settlement, and then moved our border up to the bottom of Senegal. So we lost most of our landmass, and what that did is it had an effect of, well, actually, I can show you right here, of making a center, a visual center on the map of Frenchville, a visual center. And then I looked at how the lots were numbered. You all have atlases. Where do you start numbering a map? Top, the edge. You don't number maps from the middle. Why is 3, which is in the middle of the map? Why is 3 in the middle of the map? And I got to thinking, well, this looks really odd. Why would they start numbering stuff in the middle? And also, they said they picked 40 lots randomly that looked like they were about the right size, except for 2 of them, 3A and 3B. Everything else was large enough. 3A and 3B weren't large enough. In fact, when we put out a bid for additional lands to be put in, we put a minimum lot size. We said it could be no smaller than this big. But the one that won wouldn't have been able to put a bid in. At this point, I became suspicious. My board became suspicious. I brought it to the board. We're told to trust the process. Trust the process. But every time we try to step in, every time our board members would try to push, they'd be pushed back, they'd be rebuffed. They'd be told, just wait, it's going to work out in the end. It's going to be fine. And it wasn't. So the feeling from the board was basically we were doomed. We wouldn't have given away a majority vote if we would have thought there was something to fight with. If we thought that we had something to disagree on. We gave it away because we thought it was in the bag. And all of the guidelines the state uses, those printed, Scott Brown at our first Valley Unified meeting said right out, if you're gonna, you really should think twice about putting a school in a place that doesn't have municipal water, because you're gonna build water tanks. Because you need to do water, you need to do fire suppression. He said that, and I'm like, well, that's what we've been talking about all along. And then when it came time to evaluate in the site selection, the cost of the water, so the fire suppression, that was the question asked, like, how much more is it gonna cost to have fire suppression versus not having fire suppression? The answer was, oh, it's negligible. What world do you live in where the cost of having water tanks to put out fire costs the same as not having water tanks to put out fire? It's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. So it became clear throughout the process that there was nothing we could do to move the ball. We could just sit down and let it happen. I personally pushed my board, and I'm letting you know about some politics here. I don't think my board really initially wanted to think about it. But then things kept coming in and coming in. And then all of the stuff happened with site selection. It became clear it didn't matter what we said or what we wanted. What was going to happen was going to happen. We have no control. And that's ultimately, I think, what pushed us away, is the realization that it doesn't matter what we say or what we do. Ultimately, Valley Unified decides everything. And we don't really have much control over it. So it's a much longer answer than I gave you last time. Last time I think I was being flippant. I'm sorry, Tammy. This has been a really awful process for us. And our board is feeling like we're constantly being manipulated through this process. We feel like we're the 500-pound gorilla that agreed to get put in a cage and then hooked. We're not coming out of it in a good space. And with this RSU thing, doors unlocked. We're out. We're making demands. We are. We're here, we're still talking. But I don't think SAD 27 is at a point where we're willing to bend on this particular issue. So, I mean, I'm willing to talk about other issues. I mean, it's customary when doing negotiations or discussions to take things you can't agree with and put them aside and see how much you can agree on. I'm happy to do that. But I think this is an issue for us. It's a sticking point. And one of the benefits of this entire process was when we evaluated and it brings me one more thing. When the site selection committee was meeting, we were told that we weren't allowed to talk about the costs associated with the build or the cost of upkeep or maintenance. Is that correct, Sarah? That wasn't something we factored in.
We asked, and it was, we'll get that information, and it never came.
So what ended up happening was it didn't get addressed. And then Lloyd Susie's prompt to us said, if you vote for this, then we'll talk about cost. It was interesting you even brought in a prompt. When we talked to the commissioner, it was like, that's absolutely something that should have been talked about. That could have been talked about at any time. It's up to you to decide. We were told it wasn't something to move forward on. So I guess what I'm saying is we're willing to talk about other things. Right now, I think that issue we're pretty firm on. As I was going to say, one of the side effects of all this is we had a chance to evaluate what our school needs. And board members before me were wise enough to put the money into the school and make sure our school wasn't a mess. We are in a position where we can continue to use our school. And I think that's the board's position. Worst case scenario, we just stay in Fort Kent at the high school. We don't need this school as bad as everyone else needs this school. We will survive. We always have survived, we will survive. SAD 27 is always survived.
So in your letter, it stated that you guys wanted to talk about the voting and the percentage. But in the letter, it wasn't completely stated, or was it, did I miss it, that site selection was a problem? Because it said,
Yeah.
it wasn't there.
Okay. Let me see if I can find the letter.
Sure. Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's here.
You might have a school that's good to keep children in. But what good is a school, brick and mortar, if you can't provide the programs and education to the 21st century? We can't, we're all in the same place right now. I mean, yeah, we could run our schools too. But the main concern for me is the amount of opportunity we can give these children if we all combine into one school. We can't do that with 3 separate high schools with declining numbers. Now, you might not be declining as fast as the other communities right now, but we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I'm looking at it more of the opportunities we can give these children. When they graduate high school, we'll be able to say they were able to do pretty much whatever they wanted. Right now, they're at a bare minimum. I mean, they got
What are they
their core-
doing?
Well, they got their core classes, but
Like, my kids go to university, they're taking university classes now. They're doing the tech center stuff.
And so do our kids, but when you're limited to 3 students, 4 students, 5 students with certain teachers or courses, that makes the difference.
Why do you think that's not going to be the same when we combine? Why wouldn't we just
Strengthen
lay off?
numbers.
I mean,
Why?
we'd only be Frenchville and Senegal would bring in some classes 8, some classes like 16 kids. Some of it might not even warrant expanding the number of teachers we have in some of these classes. I mean, the only way we save money is if we cut costs, right? So if we're gonna have additional programs, we gotta cut something. I mean, we don't just combine everything together and have all the teachers and all the administrators. I mean, just the cost of administration of this thing alone is costing us a lot of money. If we didn't have to pay all these administrators, we had 1 administrator, we could buy 4 teachers. We could have them tomorrow. We have more administrators in SAD 27 than we've ever had.
SAD 33 too. I remember when this all started five years ago, well, I don't even know how many years, but I was new to the board and I thought, I just remember how fast decisions were being made. It was, do we want to do regional service centers, like combined superintendent, and I see Madawaska and Fort Kent's hands go up and SAD 33's there, like, can we just think about this? So to say that the process has been fast, it has been, but just keep in mind that it wasn't, I don't know, there was a time where I don't want to say you guys needed it, like you just said we don't need it like you do. I remember SAD 33 thinking, we don't need it that much, except for our numbers. Financially, we're fine, our buildings are good for what we can make, but our budgets are passing and we're fine. The only thing that hurts us is our numbers. So there was a time when it wasn't numbers for you guys, but it was budgets for you guys. And I think we all need each other, to say the least. And I think our students, again, why we're doing this, I think our students need us and need this.
So just for the record, I feel that as SAD 27's superintendent when this started, I did share with the board Rules Chapter 60 and 61 for school construction, and we did go over what those rule chapters say. I've never built a school, so in sharing those documents with the board, I wasn't trying to sell them a bill of goods that with some other ulterior motive. So when SAD 27 did concede to go with 3 board members to Valley Unified, it was based on the knowledge that was shared with them in Rule Chapter 60 and 61 which I didn't write, somebody did, and we all understood it to be what it is. But ultimately, that board, chooses to vote the way that they vote, and it is what it is. Specific to costs that were demanded by the site selection committee, we were repeatedly told that we didn't have costs associated with the school because the school hasn't been designed. So those costs were going to come when we had a school that we could throw the costs to. So again, I just feel like there's a lot of, I don't know if it's direct or indirect finger pointing, but I was very honest throughout this process that we were not going to get involved. It was going to be a site selection committee that made the decisions, and I apologize if now we have board members assuming that this was a scripted process. And finally, in regards to how many administrators we currently have, we do have a very solid administrative team, but it's shared through 3 districts, and we've done more in the past 5 years in these districts than your previous superintendent did in the previous 20 to 30. So I just feel like I have to speak on that. We're not going to agree on site selection, and because of time, I'm going to just move us to Valley Unified Board representation. You've all had an opportunity to look at language that I've drafted. I also shared with you what is the scope of VUSC board governance, just so you can see what does Valley Unified really govern. And I broke apart the sections that from the interlocal agreement that board essentially votes on. Under functions, programs, and services, you serve as a secondary school incubator, meaning that you're planning the startup of a secondary school. You have regional superintendent and central offices are shared. Right now, you do have a school service at item C, which is going to be stricken. It had to be because that would fall under the RSU. Valley Unified cannot govern a school. Same thing with D, the regional secondary school transportation, that would fall under RSU language. You can provide other services. You hire an executive director. You can approve new members and associate members. You have authority and powers for a whole slew of things, including organizational powers, contracts, employment, property, expenditures, investment of funds, reserve funds, position of property indebtedness, purchase of services and goods, acceptance of gifts, funds, federal and state funds, policies. You have the authority to borrow working capital. You have the authority to eminent domain powers, so bonding authority, and then you have responsibility of provision for free education. You approve a budget, and you can adjust that budget if you so choose based on a supermajority vote. You can also have the power to withdraw, dissolve, or terminate member for just cause or transfer, and you can amend anything in this agreement as well. So that's what Valley Unified does. Those are the powers that they have, and that's what they do. I would bet that some of the more concerning things have to do with that regional high school. Bonding for that regional high school. I think a lot of these things are going to square away once you have an RSU, and those things for that regional high school will fall under the governance of the RSU. And then what's left is just the shared services, right? Whatever you guys agree on for shared services is what remains under the scope of the governance of Valley Unified. So in the draft language that I gave you, this would be on one end making the balance of representation more representative of what the 3 districts pay in. SAD 27 would adjust to 5 directors on the board to represent their 51% of the cost share. 33 would be 2 directors to represent their 15%, and then Madawaska had 3 directors representing their roughly 34%. And then making sure that we understand that having representation that comes from more than one community, if you represent more than one community, is important. So at no time in item B shall an SAU appoint more than 3 directors from one member community. The number 3 was chosen because Madawaska is alone in one community and they have 3 directors, so I felt naturally that would be the baseline, 3. And then aside from that, looking at making sure that if we so choose, in item K, that maybe the RSU board becomes also the Valley Unified Board, so that, you know, we can streamline this thing. There is language throughout your interlocal agreement for 7 nights supermajority, and it was suggested that maybe we look at keeping a supermajority language and simply adjust to 8 out of 10 members or 4/5 supermajority. And these are the things that you vote on in interlocal agreement for a supermajority vote: your selection of your executive director, any change to administration, your approval of the budget, your amending the cost share, your dissolving of the service center, your transfer of the service center to another, or your amendment of the interlocal agreement. So I guess the conversation is, are we open to supporting this change or another, bringing it to the Valley Unified Board for possible vote on adjusting the interlocal agreement as an amendment?
Question?
Yeah.
Would this be until if and when an RSU board is created with 1 person, 1 vote?
Yeah, and I think between now and then, if this would just be a temporary, we would really have to work with taking that RSU formation and making sure we're not duplicating services with Valley Unified, and really separating, you know, what happens with the school and what happens with the shared services. I think there's currently some things that are overlapping.
Ben, this has nothing to do with your question here, but just for clarification, 27, is it Fort Kent, Wallagrass, New Canada, St. Francis, and St. John Plantation? Those are the towns that are represented in 27.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All of our directors on MSCD 27 represent part of Fort Kent.
Yeah, they do.
Say that again? That was
All of our directors represent part of Fort Kent. We don't have any director that does just one community.
Oh,
Yeah, SAD 27 has wards, and the wards are established based on X number of constituents or voters or the population, and so there is overlap of the town line. So for example, Keith Johnrow he's the St. Francis St. John rep, but he's also my rep in where I live on St. John Road in Fort Kent. He's also my rep because it creeps into Fort Kent. So that happens with the other board members as well.
Yeah, New Canada goes right to Doris's Cafe, and Wallagrass goes, I think, to Doris's School. No, it's right on Pleasant Street, Upper Pleasant Street, near the outdoor center.
Yeah.
So it's not based on town lines?
It's wards.
Right, it's the population, but it always creeps into Fort Kent.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like St. Francis and St. John together, I don't think they have more than 400 people. You know, so you could, if we gave them a full vote, we'd have to increase, we'd have a board with 20 people on it.
If you go
Yeah.
equal on it.
The Wallagrass rep though is Persus because he represents all of Wallagrass and a little bit of Fort Kent, just like Jake is all of New Canada. So he's the New Canada rep, but he also has a couple of Fort Kent, you know what I mean? So that's, they do have their own rep, but they represent some Fort Kent residents as well.
I don't think I realized that.
We used to have boards in our own town, like the first
Right,
time
I remember
ran it,
that.
just got rid of them, I had to like only collect signatures from like Market Street and President's,
I'm-
until far.
I know that there was, I had to ask people, what's your address before?
Do they all have equal vote?
Every represent, yeah, and within a, I think it's a 2% margin or something. I think on the book it's like 802 is what it says, something like that. Sarah and Toby, do you think this would satisfy the SAB 27 board's concerns with Valley Unified's lack of weighted representation?
I have a hard time predicting what comes out of the board sometimes, but I feel like your item B here, as you know, it'll be difficult because when new positions come for stuff, everybody does the not it, you know? So you'd basically be asking, we have 3 other communities, and like you said, they represent some of Fort Kent, but 2 of the 3 of them would have to take on 2 boards. When you're agreeing to being on a board, you're basically agreeing to be on 2 boards. I think that could be.
This came out of concerns from Madawaska, and I think they're accused as well that they didn't want 5 members representing Fort Kent.
I understand that. Well, we have 3 at the Valley Unified, and then one of them is not Fort Kent. So, I mean, like, I think as a board, we do our best. We kind of really pushed that to have the 3rd member be not Fort Kent based, because we want representation as well, you know, from the other communities within our district.
We only have 4 directors who are exclusively Fort Kent.
Right. Oh, yeah. So,
There you go.
right, so it wouldn't be 5.
And I didn't think we were going to be eliminating the service, dissolving the service center.
We wouldn't.
I just saw that it was dissolving after 2043.
No, that's, that, the language in dissolution says you can only do so after 2043.
Oh, after the year 2043, I'm sorry. Sorry. I thought that was reference to the statute.
For you. Also, the year in my account. Yeah. Pretty close.
Josh, do you think that our board would be good at this too?
Well, we had talked about it before, and I didn't hear anybody raise concerns. They thought it was fair. I'm not gonna lie, we're not a big district, so I don't think there was anybody who raised any concerns at our board. And I think when Ben brought it up, everybody was okay with it. I might be wrong, but I think that's what, leaving there, that's what my, what about you?
Yeah.
Because it makes sense if you look at the writing percentages. Tam, what do you think about your board?
No, I mean, we discussed it, and I think, I mean, there were certain things that they weren't willing to play with, but they were open to this, so.
Things are- 27 asked for a fair vote, so this looks to me as fair as you can get it, as far as proportionate voting. If you have 10 votes. I mean, it's gonna change, I mean, it could change down the line, you know, as everything gets reevaluated, so who knows? I think it's evaluated, what, every 2 years, you said, or 1 year?
Or what, and
Just
this,
the
or,
proportionate voting and everything.
it stays unless there's a trigger of more than 8% change in either valuation or population. That would trigger a re-examination of the funding formula.
Personally, I'm still okay with it.
Our board, Tammy, I mean, when it was discussed with us, there was still an issue as far as, again, Ben, if we can get that breakdown, what's in place now as compared to what would actually be changing, what are we changing to? But I thought there was issues with that, because we're going from a third.
Yeah.
And that's what got us all here in the first place. So now we're changing that in the 11th hour. So I thought there was definitely concern with that. I'm not saying that we're not willing to approve it or not, but I definitely thought there was a concern with it.
I mean, there was on 33 too, we felt the same, but we realized where everybody sat, so.
I mean, we're losing a vote here, so we just realized, but we're willing to work with everyone to get this project moving forward.
In the letter, you want proportionate voting, so this is proportionate voting. And it's not the lack of trying, like the letter states, we have been trying. I mean, I think all districts have been voting. And letter 27 states clearly that you guys weren't being heard, we were ignoring you. I didn't feel that way. I really thought that we were trying to work with you guys. And I respect the way you feel, but just know that I don't think that's the way it might work out.
And the timing between the two meetings, so June, then we have the budget to pass, that's priority. Then we have to figure out how to get our students into school with COVID, that's priority, so the timeline.
And we were supposed to have another think tank meeting, but 27 canceled, not us, or not us.
We did, but we did because not everybody's had a chance to talk about the issues. So we're gonna go to another meeting where somebody had talked to the board, I don't remember which board it was, but that's why we called it off, it wasn't just.
Well, it was rescheduled, but then it was called.
You still hadn't had a chance to have a meeting. We've been looking at your agendas, and think tank wasn't on there, so if you weren't gonna talk about it, we didn't feel it was worth coming in unless everybody had a good discussion with the board. And that's what we meant, is we said, if you're not prepared to come in, because you talked to your board and reach some thoughts on where you're gonna be, we didn't think it was worth coming in for that last meeting, and that's why we did it. It wasn't spite, it was just we looked at your agenda and we had
absolutely.
talked about it.
And it was on our August agenda, but then after our meeting, it got canceled, so. We were meaning to, it was there, but again,
We had talked about
budgets,
it a little bit.
COVID,
I know.
If we would have felt comfortable, we would have.
I think as far as the distribution of votes, this is a step in our direction, this is where we want to be. The other language in this, I'd like to just vet that a little bit. I don't think we're gonna have an issue with the 5
I don't remember. Can I claim brain injury still?
Yeah, well, I think complicating matters was the talk of the
There's just so-
tuitioning schools.
So much talk,
Yeah.
I
But
don't
the
remember.
tuitioning school is kind of a separate issue,
right?
but it's also a similar issue.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
there's certainly overlap, right?
So that was where our board left it when we talked about it. In running the population number, street population, we're not that far off either, and in those two, not just the contribution, but we're close to 50%. In SAD 27 proper, like in our contributing towns, not our outlying towns, we're close to 50% of the population of voting people. Like if we just look at, I'm just using Wikipedia, so, and the 2018 census. The numbers come pretty close, if I'm not mistaken. I think 33, dips a little below 15, but not much. And I think Madawaska goes up a little bit if we're looking at people and not just kids.
Pupils and,
What's that?
yeah.
We look at people generally, because this is focusing just on kids. Madawaska has a bigger population than
Citizens.
Yeah, citizens. Yeah, this is something we had entertained early on because when we did the straw poll, because one of the things we were looking at is what the vote would be if we just voted across the board. And Madawaska's got more voting people than Fort Kent does, despite the fact that we have more kids. It's really weird.
Right, because this is for Valley Unified, but the RSU is based on population. Valley Unified is pupils and assessment, but we're finding that, this is what you're saying, that they
Very
kind of
similar.
match.
Yeah, they line up pretty.
Yeah, I don't remember. Yeah. I don't remember if 32 goes up or down. It might be the valuation brings you up a little bit. I'm not sure, but it's pretty close. Okay, that's where I think we are. I think the distribution's fine. It doesn't address the issue we have like towns, but and as far as the language around the other stuff in here, I don't think we went too deep into the weeds on that, but I think we can. That's not a problem. I don't see that being a huge issue for us to discuss.
So, just to recap, with regards to the RSU, it seems like the only thing that's on the table is inviting other member communities, and I think we want to go back to our boards and have those discussions about that. Site selection, it seems like we're at an impasse with that right now with this group. But perhaps further conversations with your boards about that can occur. And then with Valley Unified Board, for the most part, we seem to be okay, but I think some of us definitely want to go back to our board and just make sure that we're good with this. And I'm sure some of that has to do with the other moving parts in this negotiation as well. How do you want, for next steps, how do you want me to proceed? Do we just look at our school boards, see how the school boards react, and then plan accordingly, or should I preemptively look to schedule mediation on especially, I think, site selection? Straw poll is going to be the site selection is going to be the stickler, it seems like. I guess I'm just looking for guidance from you guys. What do you think I should do? Let the boards talk first, or should I start looking at some sort of mediation?
Well, will it change anything if we talk to our boards first, like,
I'm just
Meaning-
looking at the time.
Yeah.
December 30th.
yeah? But like you guys, we know relatively where our boards stand, like we're not gonna make decisions for them. But is it worth going back to them and waiting, or should we just move?
When are the next 3 board meetings?
Madawaska has a has a special meeting,
Monday.
Monday.
Or November 16th.
27 is on the 2nd November, and 33 is on the 16th, but it could be moved up to the 9th, if we wanted to get that in time.
What if a mediator, if that's the route that's gonna be ending up happening, were contacted just to schedule, but after these meetings, you either keep that or you don't?
That sounds like a good plan.
I think the only issue with mediator is we, as a board, discuss this, and I don't know if we are willing to assent to the fact that our letter was a grievance. That needed formal remediation. I mean, we said we wanted to come to the table and talk about the RSU, we've done that. Talk about it. I don't, and according to the regionals, the rules, if we have a mediation, we're on the hook for paying for it at SC 27. I don't know, well, actually, I don't believe our letter was meant to be a formal request for some sort of arbitration. It's not what we intended. Secondly, it's troublesome that Kate Grossman decided to just tell us that that's what we were doing. That was not. This goes to that powerlessness feeling where, oh, we see your letter and we're going to call it something, and you're going to pay for it. So that's the piece of mediation that I'm hung up on, because we've never assented to this being a formal dispute. We sent a letter just saying we've got issues, and Kate Grossman decided it was something that triggered our ADR in the agreement. We never consented.
Who is this individual? I'm sorry. I don't-
Your lawyer.
Oh, the lawyer, sorry.
Your lawyer.
I don't
Your
remember.
Valley Unified's lawyer.
Gotcha.
I don't know. How would you advise me, or how are we gonna get through this issue of site selection?
We don't have much time.
I can't help you. I can't help you.
Well, I don't think site selection is the issue. The issue is forming the RSU. That's a whole other issue.
But if we can't come to a conclusion of site selection, then what's the purpose of forming an RSU?
Exactly. I mean, I don't disagree with that. But I mean, that's the deadline, right?
For the RSU.
Mm-hmm.
Which is based on site selection.
Not
And everybody's saying it's non-negotiable.
Yep. Who would you suggest for mediator? Anybody have any ideas?
I had a list of attorneys.
Oh, you sent them, yeah. Let me talk to the board chairs. Is that fair? I don't think we're in any position, none of us here can make an actual decision for our boards tonight, can we?
Nope.
Talk to the board chairs. I mean, Gary should be out of the woods sometime in December.
He should be back
I hope
next
he's
week.
watching this.
Sundays, he can't hunt Sundays.
You know. But I think that would be the thing to do. I don't think we're in an opposition to moving more quickly, but I think it probably has to go through the chair.
Okay. Anything else for this evening? Okay, well, I thank you all.
Thank you.
You bet. Finish this off, do your notes.